David Manthos is the Communications Director at Skytruth, an environmental research nonprofit using remote sensing and geospatial data to inform the world about environmental and conservation issues. David has a BA in Geography from Bucknell University, served as an AmeriCorps Vista in West Virginia, monitoring water quality in the coal and gas fields, and at Skytruth leads crowdsourced map projects while monitoring and reporting on mining, drilling, and other conservation issues. Please join me in welcoming David.
Thank you. It's a great opportunity to be here and talk to you about what we're doing. What I want to talk to you about is our efforts to use Maps Engine as both an input and an output for communicating environmental issues, particularly around the process of hydraulic fracturing, shale drilling, which is becoming a major resource extraction boom here in the United States and is spreading around the world. If you're not familiar with the concept in general, it's an oil and gas production technique to get more oil or gas out of a well. It involves pumping millions of gallons of water into a well mixed with sand and chemicals. And there are a number of environmental concerns about this, from groundwater contamination, spills at the surface, habitat fragmentation. This is a state forest in Pennsylvania that are being divided up, as well as public health, the concerns of living next to these highly industrialized operations with houses all around the area. Skytruth is focused on using satellite and aerial imagery to communicate these issues, not just to measure an environmental issue, but also to show that to the public, because we believe that these images are incredibly powerful for informing people about what's happening. Some of these sites you really can't get a perspective on from the ground. You need to see what it looks like from the air. So we wanted to use the high-resolution aerial imagery that's flown by the U.S. Department of Agriculture every 2 to 3 years. You see a lot of that imagery in Google Earth. If you look in the United States, click back through the years, a lot of that is the USDA high-resolution aerial survey imagery. And we wanted to look at drilling operations all across Pennsylvania, to start there. And we wanted to identify potential public health risks. We were approached by researchers from Johns Hopkins who wanted to know what are some air contamination issues possibly? What features aren't being mapped, aren't being studied? And we immediately thought of these impoundments here. So I mentioned it requires millions of gallons of water to hydraulically fracture to stimulate a well. Some of that returns to the surface, and it's mixed with water. It's mixed with whatever chemical reactions occurred in the formation. And these can be anywhere from several hundred square meters to 7,000 square meters on average surface area. And we have reports of people complaining of headaches, of respiratory problems because of living downwind of these. So it seemed like a natural place to study. There was no good data from the state of Pennsylvania on where these impoundments were. So we decided, well, this is a project where we can engage the public in mapping the issue, not just setting them loose. We can't just set them loose in Google Earth, as it would be hard to keep that consistent. So we used Maps Engine to host entire counties of aerial survey imagery, and then took the permit data from the state of Pennsylvania to say, all right, we're going to have you look at each individual site across Pennsylvania, and we're going to ask you, we know this place has been permitted for a well. Is it still a farmer's field, or has it been developed for oil and gas? And if it has, then mark anything you see that looks like these facilities. So Maps Engine was incredibly helpful for hosting all that imagery so we can point people in the right direction to start getting at this data that is quite frankly not being tracked anywhere. It's taken us about a year to get the first project through to completion. The state of Pennsylvania color code shows the different years that these impoundments were identified across the state. It started out kind of slowly, about 200 wells in 2008 when drilling first started picking up. Now we're seeing that it's about 500 to 600 impoundments, these large wastewater facilities across the state at any given time. They're usually reclaimed after a while, but it helps us see not only in space where they are, but also in time when a well or when an impoundment appears and when it's removed and reclaimed, so that the researchers at Johns Hopkins can start to draw a correlation between does living next to one of these result in respiratory problems and problems during pregnancy. And that data would not otherwise exist. The state of Pennsylvania, when asked about these ponds, basically pointed the reporter to another nonprofit organization who has not been tracking these except for the data that the state agency was providing, which was incomplete. So we were able to provide a map of drilling activity. This GIF just simply shows active well pads throughout the year. And engaging people in the process of mapping. That was really the big thing that we wanted to do. We could have sat an intern down and just digitized all those ponds. We could have just had someone in the office sit down and go through that process. But there's two things here. It's the citizen engagement and it's scalable. Now that we've built this project on the PyBossa platform, pulling in imagery from Maps Engine, we can replace that easily. We can say, all right, we're done with Pennsylvania. Let's put in aerial imagery from Texas and put in the permit data and start that project. It's easily repurposable for new geographies and for other environmental issues. You may want to know about expansions at a mine or any number of or deforestation. Any number of other issues can start to interchange with that. This is all available on GitHub. I'd be happy to talk to people about that. And we also found that the citizen engagement, not just putting us online where anyone can find it, sometimes some people will find it and they'll really go to town. We had one fellow in Japan do 5,000 image analysis tasks on his iPad while commuting back and forth between work. Kind of a crazy story, but that's the exception, not the rule. We found a lot of people, if you just leave them to their own devices, they may come in, do a couple dozen sites, and then they're going to go out off and find somewhere else. But if you sit people down in a room, especially if it's college students, maybe get some pizza and say, look, let's sit down and help us do 5,000 tasks or get this project to 50% completion. That gives people engagement in the issue, gets people talking and learning about the issue as they're going. This is my alma mater, Bucknell. We had students from the University of San Francisco actually on a field trip to West Virginia, came by and spent an afternoon with us to study these issues and help us produce the data. So a couple of points about using data and crowdsourcing any projects like that is you need to have a campaign. You just cannot throw it out there to the public and expect a major project to be completed. You need to explain to people, why is this an issue, who's studying it, what's going to be done with the data, and so on and so forth. Keep the tasks simple. There are a lot of crowdsourcing applications that ask for an incredible amount of information about one image or point on the map. Just keep it simple. Ask one question. Is this a well pad or not? Not sure. Go on to the next task. It keeps it simple and fast and flowing. Break up the work. That's a challenge we've had to do because we want to put an entire state up and say, process these 3,000 sites. Look at all of them. That works, but it helps if you have instant feedback that, hey, I just finished a county. I did that in 20 minutes, and now I can go off and do something else. Invite people, sit people down in a room to participate in it. And it's not just about the data, it's about engaging the people in the process. And as they're looking at site after site of this extraction industry, they can make their own decision, make their own informed decision about what they think it would be like living next here. Do we need to have more regulation? Do we need to set barriers to how close it can be to a private residence? Just a quick shout out to Skybox. I know you'll hear a bit more about this later. We asked Skybox to collect an image in Ohio where we're doing a project, and we asked them to center around this place, which is a Boy Scout camp in Ohio. This is where young men go out to build fires, go swimming, shoot bow and arrow. There's a lodge and swimming area, but all around it, 750 meters to north-northwest, there's a well pad that was just completed this summer. There are 14 more within a 5-kilometer area of this site. And then very close to here is a large gas infrastructure pad. I think it's a compressor station to pump the gas. This is going to be running around the clock, producing air emissions. Is that too close to the site? We're not particularly sure, but this imagery is as good as NAPE and the aerial survey imagery we're using, and it gives us the ability to rapidly look at places of interest and get high-quality imagery to study these issues and engage the public with. So, thank you.